We're in Exodus chapter 7. Exodus chapter 7. We did get through verse 7 last week, but we'll back up and read through those verses again just to be reminded of what is taking place. Moses, after being discouraged because of the response of Pharaoh initially when he goes to request that the children of Israel be allowed to go into the wilderness to worship. Pharaoh makes it more difficult on the children of Israel, even to the point of beating them. And they come out and cry against Moses. And Moses then asks God, why? Why have you allowed this to happen? Why have you sent me? Why have you not delivered them? And a question of impatience that we might uh, all relate to in some way. And then God would remind Moses who he is, that is, who God is, and remind him of his nature and that um, he was going to surely bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. The Lord said unto Moses, chapter 7, verse 1, See, I have made thee a God to Pharaoh. That is, Pharaoh being um, a man who believed in many gods and a nation that believed in many different gods. Moses is going to be like one of those deities, if you will, to him. But ultimately, the point is that God is saying that you're going to be my spokesman, that you're going to give the words that are needed to Aaron, and then Aaron is going to be your prophet. He's going to relay those words that you give to him to Pharaoh. And Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. Verse 2, Thou shalt speak all that I command thee, and Aaron thy brother shall speak unto Pharaoh, and he send the children of Israel out of his land, And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and multiply my signs and my wonders to the land of Egypt, but Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt, and bring forth mine armies and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments. Looking at this on the surface, many think that God is moving Pharaoh around like a pawn and being harsh and cruel to the Egyptians unjustly, but that's not the God that we serve. In no way has he taken away, and does he ever take away, the free will of Pharaoh to choose, but he's informing Moses what is going to happen. This is what's going to happen. By the things that I do, Pharaoh's heart is going to be hardened because he's going to refuse to follow me. Essentially, Pharaoh is going to make the decision to not follow, even after seeing signs and wonders. And he says that Pharaoh will not listen to you. And because of that, I'm going to show my power. I'm going to show who I am and bring them out by my hand. I'm going to lay my hand upon Egypt and bring forth mine armies and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments. God's providence is an amazing thing that surpasses our understanding. But that he, while never taking away Pharaoh's free will, is able to show his self, his nature, his power, reveal himself to the Egyptians and to the Israelites on this occasion. And yet everything happens as he says that it will happen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, verse 5, when I stretch forth mine hand upon Egypt and bring out the children of Israel from among them. And Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded them, so did they. And Moses was fourscore years old, he was 80, and Aaron was fourscore and 3 years old, 83, when they spake unto Pharaoh. So now, as we pick up in verse 8, we're going to begin reading what takes place at their meeting with Pharaoh once again. The Lord, Jehovah, spake unto Moses, unto Aaron, saying, When Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, Show a miracle for you, Then thou shalt say unto Aaron, Take thy rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and it shall become a serpent. And Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Then Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, now the magicians of Egypt. They also did in like manner with their enchantments. For they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents. So let's stop there for a moment and think about what has just taken place. This is a sign that God has shown to Moses back when he was uh, informing Moses that he would lead the people of Israel out of Egypt, and Moses was trying to make the excuses and trying to find a way out of the responsibility. He told him to throw down his rod and it would become a serpent, and it did. And told him to, and it scared Moses. But he told Moses to uh, pick it back up, take it by the tail, and he did, and it became a rod again. Now they have also shown this sign to the children of Israel, among other signs, to confirm that the message that they had was from Jehovah above, that from God above. Now they are informed to go and do this before Pharaoh. And Aaron, the one having the rod at this moment, does as God tells him, throws it down, it becomes a serpent. But then Pharaoh calls his own uh, wise men, his own sorcerers, his own magicians, and it says that they did in like manner with their enchantments. They cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents. How is that possible? We know that what God was doing through Aaron was miraculous. How is it possible that these of that belonged to Pharaoh were able to do the same thing that Aaron did? What thoughts do you have? Okay, sleight of hand. Um, Two options come to my mind. One is the fact that they are magicians, and professional magicians can really do some crazy things. Some people have called me by the name when they learn my last name is Angel. They mistakenly call me Chris Angel, referring and because they're familiar with the magician on TV that did some pretty crazy things, sometimes even making some claims that maybe he should not. Um, so, by the sleight of hand and by the skill that they have, they are able to really trick. It could even be the case that their rods were already serpents and they made them in some way stiff, but then when they threw them down, they appeared as live serpents. Then, um, in some way, they might have used their skill, their sleight of hand, their trickery. A second option might be that God allowed their rods to become serpents on that occasion, um, and gave them that ability. We see in other places when, one example, and I don't have the reference before me, but God allows someone to speak through a witch who did not actually have the power to do this, but God made it possible on this occasion to reveal um, to the ones, and I'm forgetting the passage and even the details of it at the moment. I believe that was that Saul that sent to the witch at Endor, and it was Samuel that spoke to him, but the witch was not able to do that. God allowed that to happen. So it is possible that God caused their rods to actually become serpents, and someone may say, well, why? Well, so that God can ultimately show his power over them even more so. Um, because what's going to happen next? Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods, but Pharaoh would harden his heart. He hardened Pharaoh's heart that he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. What questions or comments or thoughts? Right. That's right. Good point. Simon the sorcerer wanted to buy the power that the apostles had, which he was not able to do. And he saw that they had true power and that his was just trickery. What other comments, questions? So Pharaoh is not going to heed them at this sign. So the first plague is going to be brought upon Egypt. The Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. Verse 14, he refuseth to let the people go. Get thee unto Pharaoh in the morning, lo, he goeth out unto the water, and thou shalt stand by the river's brink against he comes, so the river that he's coming to, and the rod which was turned to a serpent, thou shalt take it in thine hand, and thou shalt say unto him, the Lord God of the Hebrews hath sent me unto thee, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. And behold, hitherto thou wouldest not hear. This saith the Lord, in this thou hast said, know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in mine hand upon the waters which are in the river, and they shall be turned to blood. And the fish that is in the river shall die, and the river shall stink, and the Egyptians shall loathe to drink of the water of the river. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying to Aaron, take thy rod and stretch out thine hand upon the waters of Egypt, upon their streams, upon their rivers, and upon their ponds, and upon all their pools of water, that they may become blood, and that there may be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. And Moses and Aaron did so, as the Lord commanded, and he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. And the fish that was in the river died, the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink of the water of the river, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. Before we continue on, we'll stop there, think about some things concerning what has just happened. The Nile River, well, first of all, water is an absolutely essential source. And while blood is also an absolutely essential element of our lives and for us to live, replacing water with blood is not acceptable, and it would be out of place for us to try to survive that way. I'm going to share with you some words and articles from David Panfield here in a moment about this occasion, because we will later read in the book of Exodus that God's plague was against all the gods of Egypt. And in each one of these plagues, we can dig into the history of Egyptian religion and their belief. They're trying to think of their polytheism, their belief in many gods, and see some of the gods that were associated with the things that these plagues would have exposed, would have overcome their idea of their God, and show Jehovah's power over any man-made god that they served. This would affect all of the water that it says that they could see, that the river, the Nile River, the ponds, the pools, the standing water, the water that is in even their pots and vessels that they have stored, this was all turned to blood. There's great irony in the fact that, first of all, the Nile River was considered the quote unquote lifeblood of Egypt. And yet God turns it into blood. Furthermore, one of their gods that we're going to read about here in a moment was depicted as its blood, that god's blood being the Nile River. Um, and so God turns the Nile and every uh, readily available source that they have into uh, water into blood, so that the fish died. They were not able to use these things that they needed in order to live and survive. Certainly, this would have been a great pestilence upon them. Let's see if I can pull up these things. I believe um, David Padfield, as far as I can tell, I believe he may be a non institutionalist. I'm not super familiar with him, but he has some great resources. Um, and there's all kinds of different flavors when it comes to non institutionalism. But he has some great, again, resources and research that he has done. He says here of the first plague, and this is in this article is one entitled "Against the Gods of Egypt," or against all the gods of Egypt. First plague, water changed to blood. The Nile was the heartbeat of Egypt. All trade, commerce, and crops depended upon the Nile. In the first plague, the water of the Nile was changed to blood. It is not clear from the original text whether the water was changed to literal blood or just changed to a blood red color. I um, don't think that I've ever heard of that even offered uh, a as an option. But in either case, he says the fish in the Nile would have died. Not only was the Nile red, but other waters as well, even the water that was drawn for use in houses and stored in stone or wooden jars. He says this plague was an affront to many of the greatest gods of Egypt. The great god, and I don't know how to pronounce that one, but it's Num or something along that line, was the guardian of the Nile River. He is usually represented as a human being with a ram's head. Happy was the spirit of the Nile and its dynamic essence. Happy was the god of the annual Nile inundation. Epithets for Happy describe him as being the lord of the fishes and birds and marshes. The very position of Happy made it certain that he would become successful as a deity. The entire country looked to the Nile as the source of all wealth and provender, and he's quoting here from one Spence, who has written ancient Egyptian myths and legends. So the Nile is the source of all wealth and provender, so that the deity which presided over it rapidly rose in public estimation. Thus, Happy quickly became identified with the greater and more outstanding figures in early Egyptian mythology. He thus became a partner with the great original gods who had created the world, and finally um, came to be regarded as the maker and molder of everything within the universe. We find him credited with the attributes of Nu and primeval water mass, and this, in effect, made him a father of Ra, who had emerged from that element. Happy, indeed, stood in more immediate relationship to the Egyptians than almost any other god in their pantheon. Without the sun, Egypt would have been plunged into darkness, but without the Nile, every living creature within its borders would assuredly have perished. Then he goes on to say one of the greatest gods of Egypt was Osiris, the god of the underworld. I believe Osiris is the one that they depicted as having the Nile as its bloodstream. The Egyptians believed the Nile. Oh, there's the next statement. The Nile was his bloodstream. During this first plague, the Egyptians would have to wonder where was Turet, the hippopotamus goddess of the river. Where was Nu, the god of life in the Nile? And he goes on to offer some more quotation there concerning their gods. But notice what happens. The magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, neither did he hearken unto them, as the Lord had said. And Pharaoh turned and went in unto his house, neither did he set his heart to this also. And all the Egyptians digged round about the river for water to drink, for they could not drink of the water of the river, And 7 days were fulfilled after that the Lord had smitten the river. So, this great miracle, a devastating miracle, the plague, is wrought against the Egyptians. But then we're told that the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments. They also turned water into blood. How might that be the case? First of all, the first question comes, where did they get their water? If all of the water was turned into blood, where did they get water, fresh water, to turn into blood? How would you answer that question? Well, verse 24 tells us that they could actually get some clean water. It says that the Egyptians digged around about the river for water to drink. So it seems to be the case. If some have suggested that God had some mercy on them, but they had to work for it. The readily available water, as I mentioned before, the river, the Nile River, the water that they already had prepared and stored, those things were all turned to blood. But it seems to be the case that they were able to dig for water to drink. Um, and so likely that would have been the case for the magicians if they were starting out with fresh water and then turning it into blood. So, but how would we explain them turning the water into blood? Uh, That's exactly right. I think that's exactly right. Two options: either they did it by sleight of hand. Uh, they could have, magicians are able to exchange two actual items, sometimes without us realizing what they have done. They could have swapped fresh water that they've dug down and found with blood that they've gotten from the Nile. They could have done that by their skill that they have in sleight of hand. Or once again, we could have a situation where God allowed um, their water to turn to blood in order that He might ultimately show His power over the Egyptians. Yeah. Hmm. Right. Right. That's good. Right. Right. Some things that you notice that the magicians did not do, they did not turn the blood back to water, did they? They did not make the fish come back to life. They did not replenish these things in any way. And the most likely scenario is that the things that they've been able to do were by the sleight of hand and their trickery and their skill. 7 days were fulfilled after that the Lord had smitten the river. So He allows this to continue for a full week before returning things. Uh, I get the idea that He would return things back to normal water for them, but He's going to bring another plague because Pharaoh has hardened his heart. He did not heed. He neither did he set his heart to this also. What other questions or comments before we move on to the second plague? Chapter 8, beginning with verse 1, the Lord spake unto Moses, Go unto Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs. And the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house, and into thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and into the house of thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thine ovens, and into thy kneading troughs. And the frogs shall come up both on thee and upon thy people and upon all thy servants. And the Lord spake unto Moses, say unto Aaron, stretch forth thine hand with thy rod over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause the frogs to come up upon the land of Egypt. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt. The frog, it is my understanding, was actually one of the creatures that the Egyptians hallowed in some way, that it was a special creature to them. But I have an idea that um, if if the frogs then take them over, they're not going to like them too much. When you go to India, uh, they hallow the cows, but I imagine they don't want the cows overrunning them completely, to where they cannot even live their daily lives. Here, going to uh, bring up what Brother Padfield says here again about the Egyptian gods related to the plague of frogs. In various parts of the East, quote, he's quoting from Adam Clarke's commentary on the Bible. Instead of what we call ovens, they dig a hole in the ground in which they insert a kind of earthen pot, which having sufficiently heated, they stick their cakes to the inside, and when baked, remove them and supply their places with others, and so on. To find such places full of frogs when they came to heat them, in order to make their bread, must be both disgusting and distressing in the extreme. He says the frog was considered the theophany of the goddess Hecht, the wife of the creator of the world and the goddess of birth. Hecht was also shown with the head and body of a frog. Amulets and scarabs worn by Egyptian women to protect them during childbirth would often bear the image of Hecht for protection. Hecht was uh, believed to assist women in childbirth. Consider the irony in the statement that the frogs invaded Pharaoh's bedroom and even jumped on his bed. Frogs were so sacred in Egypt that even the involuntary slaughter of one was often punished with death. Imagine the people of the land as they went out to gather the decaying bodies of the frogs and put them into heaps. The fact uh, the fact that Pharaoh entreated Moses to intercede with Jehovah to take away the frogs was a sign that he recognized the God of Israel as being the author of the plague. Pharaoh realized this was not a natural occurrence. It is very possible that the next plague originated from flies depositing their ova in the putrid masses of the dead frogs. He's referring to the third plague, the lice, but we'll not go there tonight. Um, he mentions, well, not what he mentions, but what the text mentions, that the magicians did so with their enchantments and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt. Uh, wouldn't be too difficult for the magicians with the sleight of hand to do so when there is now an abundance of frogs that are available to them on this occasion. One thing that Padfield does bring out, that Pharaoh asked Moses to have the Lord get rid of the frogs. He doesn't have his magicians take away the frogs. In verse 8, Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron, said, entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go, that they may do sacrifice unto the Lord. And Moses said unto Pharaoh, glory over me. When shall I entreat for thee and for thy servants and for thy people to destroy the frogs from thee and thy houses, that they may remain in the river only? And he said, tomorrow. And he said, be it according to thy word, that thou mayest know that there is none like unto the Lord our God. And the frogs shall depart from thee and from thy houses and from thy servants and from thy people. They shall remain in the river only. And Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried unto the Lord because of the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses. And the frogs died out of the houses, out of the villages, and out of the fields, and they gathered them together upon heaps, and the land stank. But when Pharaoh saw that there was a respite, he hardened his heart, and hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. So Pharaoh once again is going to harden his heart. In one detail that is given here about him hardening his heart is seems to be the case that he wanted God to have the frogs make their way back to where they came from, and that there would be nothing on his part to do to clean up the mess. But God caused the frogs to be no more, but they were dead, and in their presence they had to clean them up. Um, and so Pharaoh then hardens his heart. He calls it respite there, and he hardens his heart and did not listen to them. What questions or comments? Yeah, they've had some disgusting smells up to this point for sure. That's right. God is showing, once again, the Egyptians who he is, and he's showing the Israelites who he is, informing them. And again, once again, there's not only is there the great irony and the imagery that he will use to show his power over their Egyptian gods that they claim to follow, um, but also he shows his power over their magicians. And there is um, great irony in that they like Pharaoh will go back to him to try to get rid of the frogs instead of going to his magicians. Once again, the magicians were not able to return the blood back to fresh water, and so there is irony in those things as well. Which, if one really um, honestly looked at the evidence that was before them, they could do nothing but realize that this was the one true God, the God above. But Pharaoh, in his pride, in his arrogance, continued to harden his heart. And so, because he did, there would be more plagues that would come upon them, in which God would show his power over their gods. And he would show Pharaoh his power as God, essentially not only against his gods, but also politically and in every way that God was above. What questions or comments? Lord willing, next time we will pick up here with the third plague.